Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back into a time where gods walk among mortals, cities teeter on the edge of war, and peace might just depend on a really good play. You're standing on the dusty edge of Athens, sandals half buried in the red clay, staring at a city ready to devour itself. The wind stinks of smoke and tension. Farmers mutter as they haul their goods to market. Soldiers glare at anyone who looks vaguely foreign or vaguely rich. There's a war coming. Everyone feels it. And then, like some kind of divine curveball tossed straight into the chaos, in walks Dionysus, god of wine, ritual madness, and that one guy who always shows up uninvited to the party and then somehow becomes the main event. He's got ivy in his hair, a grin that doesn't quit, and a wild idea to fix everything before it explodes. You probably won't survive this if you try it at home. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you all are drifting off from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The city of Athens is fracturing, not with earthquakes, but with politics. You drift through the agora, dodging peddlers and pamphleteers, each one shrieking about taxes, borders, or some senator who insulted another senator's goat. The Peloponnesian War isn't quite here, but it's growling in the distance like a thunderstorm deciding when to hit. And that's when you see him, Dionysus. Not everyone notices. He's good at slipping into crowds like he's just another guy with a jug of wine and too much eyeliner. But you notice. You feel the shift in the air, like something ancient and electric just plugged itself in. He walks without fear, even though tension coils around the city like a snake. Why is he here? Not for the olives, not for the politics. He's here because he knows a war is coming, and he's decided to stop it. Not with swords, with theater. You trail him past temples and taverns, past walls splashed with graffiti, both poetic and very not PG-13, until you reach a crumbling gathering place where elders argue in circles. Dionysus watches them bicker and bluster, his fingers drumming on a wine jug. He's not impressed, but he's intrigued. Here's a fun fact. Historians widely agree that Dionysus wasn't just a party god. He was also associated with transformation, liminality, and the collapse of boundaries. Between life and death, reason and madness, human and divine. That's perfect, because this city needs a transformation before it combusts. One of the elder statesmen finally shouts, "There's no saving this city unless a god intervenes." You could swear Dionysus smirks, like challenge accepted. But this is where things start to get weird. He doesn't call down thunder, doesn't throw lightning, doesn't smite anyone, although a guy nearby does trip over a chicken in a way that feels cosmically ironic. Instead, Dionysus does something completely insane. He commissions a play. No, seriously. A full-blown tragicomedy with masks and chorus lines and an actual goat. Because the Greeks did not mess around with symbolism. And here's where it gets fringe. Some scholars argue Dionysus wasn't just the god of theater. He invented it entirely as a form of divine intervention. Not just to entertain, to control, to pacify, to transform. So yeah, this isn't just a play, it's a political weapon disguised as drama. Of course, convincing people of this plan is like pitching a Netflix show during a bar fight. You walk with Dionysus as he tries to explain the concept to a general who literally spits out his wine laughing. A play? That's your plan to stop war? Dionysus just raises an eyebrow and says, "You'd rather lose your sons?" Tense silence. The general doesn't laugh again. Still, not everyone's on board. The temple elites sneer at the idea. Religion is sacred, and now this wine-soaked wanderer wants to mix it with theater mass and impromptu dance numbers? It's scandalous. The word blasphemy gets tossed around like dice. Meanwhile, Dionysus shrugs and wanders off to find the nearest olive press. You follow because, frankly, the wine is the only thing that makes sense right now. This is where you learn a quirky fact. In early Greek festivals, plays weren't just entertainment. They were rituals, offerings to the gods. Whole communities would stop what they were doing to watch. It was considered dangerous to ignore a good tragedy. And that's what Dionysus is counting on. He doesn't need to force peace. He just needs to hold a mirror up to the city, show them their own madness, their grief, their love, their fear. Wrap it all in song and satire. Let them cry. Let them laugh. Let them see. Because once you see your own tragedy on stage, how do you pick up a sword the next morning? Still, he's got a long way to go. No theater, no actors, no script, no clue whether anyone will show up. You sip your wine nervously as the sun sets over the Acropolis and wonder if maybe, just maybe, this chaos god is onto something. You wake to drums. Not the kind that summon armies. At least not yet. These are lighter, syncopated, echoing off stone walls and dusty alleys as if the whole city is breathing in rhythm. You're still in Athens, still knee-deep in political tension, and still trying to figure out how a wine god plans to avert war with a play. But something's different this morning. The air hums, like something underneath the surface is shifting, whispering, "Watch closely." You step into the streets and Athens greets you with its usual chaotic charm. The agora is alive in that barely controlled riot kind of way. Women juggle baskets of figs. Children chase each other with sticks that are somehow both swords and fishing poles. Philosophers argue under fig trees, flinging phrases like tyranny of passion, while gesturing wildly enough to knock over an amphora. You pass a bakery where smoke rolls out of a clay oven, and a kid offers you a warm sesame roll in exchange for a wild story. You hand him a vague tale about seeing a god last night, and he eyes you like you just told him you invented olives. Athens may be buzzing, but the cracks are deep. There are guards everywhere. Tense young men with patchy beards and bronze spears, stationed at every temple entrance and intersection. You pass a group of older citizens muttering about Sparta. One says, "It's only a matter of time before they strike." Another adds, "Or we do." This isn't just political disagreement. This is personal. People are scared, families divided, neighbors choosing sides. Every argument ends with someone walking away too fast, fists clenched. Here's a mainstream historical fact for you. This period, roughly the late 6th to early 5th century BCE, saw Athens caught in a whirlpool of change. Democracy was forming, sure, but so were rivalries, factions, oligarchs versus radicals. And outside the city walls, Sparta, watching, waiting. Some scholars even suggest that during these early tensions, there were shadow wars already happening. Assassinations, sabotage, the occasional suspicious temple fire. Historians still argue whether this was all state-sponsored or just passionate citizens taking things into their own oily hands. But you're just walking, watching. You pause at a small fountain, more decorative than useful, and spot a young couple whispering. They're barely teenagers, and one clutches a scroll. You inch closer, pretending to adjust your sandal strap. "Do you think he'll actually do it?" the girl asks. "The god?" the boy replies, half smirking. "Or the playwright?" "Either." The scroll is a draft of a play, rough, incomplete, and oddly tender. Even through the messy scrawl, you recognize the bones of tragedy. A mother losing a son, a soldier questioning duty, a chorus asking the audience if peace is cowardice or courage. And that's when it hits you. Dionysus isn't just planting an idea, he's letting it spread, like yeast in wine, quiet, invisible, but working. You climb a slope toward the Knicks, where citizens gather to shout their opinions at each other in what they proudly call democracy and what you'd call a verbal mosh pit. From above, the city stretches toward the sea, whitewashed buildings clinging to dusty hillsides like barnacles to a rock. From this vantage, you can see it all. Temples in shadow, smoke rising from outdoor kitchens, a small crowd gathering in an empty field, where someone's hammering wood into crude benches. That field will soon become a stage, but before that, something strange happens. You follow the sound of singing, droning, rhythmic, half-hypnotic, and end up in a small plaza where a circle has formed. In the center, a man dancing with a goat. It's unclear if the goat is willingly participating, but the man definitely is. He's masked, painted, and clearly invoking something ancient. The dance spirals into madness. The music shifts. Now it's pipes and hand claps, feet slamming into packed earth. People are laughing, then crying, then laughing again. You edge closer to a merchant who whispers, "They're rehearsing for Dionysus." This is where it gets quirky. Ancient Greek theater likely evolved directly from ritualistic performances like this. Some theories say it all began with dithyrambs, wild choral hymns sung in honor of Dionysus. No clear plot, no actors, just a chorus, a goat, and vibes. And now you're watching that primordial soup thicken into something more. There's a story forming, themes emerging, and through it all, people are, miraculously, sitting together. No fighting, no debating, just feeling. That's the seed of theater. And Dionysus knows it. By nightfall, the city is humming louder. You hear whispers everywhere. The god is planning a festival. There'll be a contest. 3 poets, 1 winner. He's building a theater, which is hilarious because there is no theater. Yet, you find Dionysus lounging on a marble bench, feet propped on a statue's broken head, surrounded by poets with sunburns and stage fright. He's grinning like a man who just bet the fate of the world on interpretive dance. "Do you know," he says casually, swirling wine in a cup that might have once held incense, "that most wars start because men take themselves too seriously?" A young dramatist asks, "And your plan is to make them laugh?" Dionysus shakes his head. My plan is to make them feel." There's a beat of silence. Then the poet mutters, "We're all going to die." "Probably," Dionysus replies, smiling wider. "But let's make it interesting." The poets groan. You stay quiet, because you're starting to believe this might actually work, or it'll blow up spectacularly, which, let's be honest, would also be peak Dionysus. You're still not entirely sure how this happened, but now you're following a literal god through a goat market. Not metaphorically, a real goat market. It smells like hay, ambition, and something you deeply hope is just cheese. Dionysus glides through the chaos like he owns the place, which, to be fair, he sort of does. He's a god, after all. And if anyone's going to invent theater, it makes perfect sense it'd be the one deity with a foot in both madness and ecstasy. Still, you can't help but ask yourself, who even is Dionysus? A fair question, because Dionysus isn't like the other gods. He's weird. He doesn't follow the rules. Where Zeus throws thunderbolts and Athena drafts legal codes, Dionysus is just dancing through vineyards and turning people into dolphins. Oh, right, that actually happened. Historical fact coming your way. In one of his most famous myths, Dionysus gets kidnapped by pirates. Rookie mistake. They tie him up and try to sell him off for ransom, but ropes don't hold gods. Instead of getting angry, Dionysus just turns the ship's mast into a vine, floods the deck with wine, and transforms the entire crew into dolphins. Except one guy, the helmsman, who was polite. He got a free pass. Morale of the story? Don't kidnap wine gods. And also, maybe, be nice. You make a mental note not to cross him. Scholars still argue whether Dionysus was a late addition to the Greek pantheon or one of its oldest, reshaped by centuries of cult worship. He doesn't fit the tidy mold of Olympian hierarchy. He's born twice, first from a mortal woman named Semele, and then from Zeus himself, who stitched the unborn Dionysus into his thigh after lightning accidentally incinerated his mother. Yes, his thigh. Just imagine explaining that to your kindergarten class. You push through a side street where vines grow too quickly, curling up stone walls like they're trying to overhear gossip. A drunk man mutters a prayer as he passes them. You never know where he's listening, he says to no one. And it's true. Dionysus is everywhere. He's in the wine jug passed between friends. He's in the ecstatic music erupting in back alleys at midnight. He's in the stranger you meet who makes you question everything and then vanishes before dawn. You follow him now through the lower city, past a chorus of women painting their arms with berry juice. They chant something low and rhythmic. He comes, wearing ivy and smiling. Their eyes roll slightly as they sway. It's both beautiful and unsettling, like watching a storm flirt with a wheat field. There's a strange duality to this god. One moment he's giggling and charming the honey cakes off a baker's daughter. The next he's whispering to a broken statue in a forgotten shrine. You see him lay a hand on the stone, just gently, and vines burst from the cracks. People think I'm all wine and dancing, he murmurs to you, not turning his head, but I am the tearing too. That lands like a pebble in your gut, a little cold splash of dread, because you realize Dionysus doesn't want to avoid war just to keep everyone safe. He wants to change the game entirely, make people confront what they are, underneath the politics and the armor and the law codes. And that's intense. You head with him to an old theater, or what used to be one. It's crumbling now, just a half circle of broken stone and wildflowers. A dog sleeps where the stage should be. A snake slithers along the back wall. Dionysus walks to the center and stamps his foot once. Everything goes quiet. The wind halts. The snake freezes. The dog lifts its head. This is where we start, he says. You stand in the center and feel it too. Like something old is remembering itself beneath your feet. Like stories are buried in the dirt, waiting for an excuse to grow. The cult of Dionysus, you learn, wasn't always about drama and masks. It started raw, rough, out in the woods. People tearing animals apart with their hands during ritual frenzy. Yes, that happened. And screaming praises through blood and leaves. Not exactly your school play kind of vibe. But over time it evolved. The madness softened. The symbols stayed. Ivy crowns, phallic processions, yes, really, animal masks. But the rituals became more structured, more performative. And suddenly you had early versions of tragedy, dance, poetry, stories that didn't just entertain, they purged. You lean against a cracked pillar and realize that's what this whole thing is about. Catharsis, that sweet psychological exhale when an audience watches pain, grief, joy, and lets it all go. The next phase is dangerous. Dionysus knows that to build something new, he has to work through the city's fear, their resistance, and their pride. So you walk with him toward the Acropolis, past a column where someone has scratched a warning, "Masks cannot save us." You raise an eyebrow. Dionysus just laughs. People are wrong about masks, he says. They don't hide you. They show what's beneath. And you think about that, because maybe theater isn't a trick. Maybe it's a mirror. And maybe that mirror is going to make a whole city look itself in the eye and flinch. The sun begins to sink. Fires light along the roads. You follow Dionysus as he gathers poets, singers, carpenters, and even a few ex-soldiers with decent voices. A team, a troupe. You're in it now. And just before you fall asleep that night, nestled on a rooftop with fig branches swaying overhead, you dream of dolphins, of vines, of a god laughing softly behind a mask he hasn't taken off yet. The morning greets you with a hammer strike. Not the war kind, yet again, but an actual hammer, slamming into wood as carpenters shout back and forth across the hillside. The god of wine has summoned builders, and they've shown up with every squeaky cart and crooked nail in the city. Because now it's real. They're building a theater. You watch the process unfold like a fever dream in slow motion. Wooden beams rise from the earth like skeletal wings. Stone seating is dragged uphill by groaning oxen. Someone spills an entire barrel of pitch and just shrugs, muttering, "Good omen." That same person immediately falls into a pile of ivy and claims they can now see the future. Honestly, you believe them. The location's not random either. You're on the southern slope of the Acropolis where the hill rolls down like a perfect natural amphitheater. In the distance, Athens bustles unaware, or pretending to be unaware, of what's emerging on its edge. A stage, a space not for war, but for stories. Historical fact? This is the real origin of the Theater of Dionysus, the world's first great performance venue. It will eventually host the works of Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, and Aristophanes. But right now it's a dusty construction site with more bees than workers and no actual plays ready. And yet, Dionysus is smiling like the whole city has already taken its seat. The first actors arrive. Well, actors is a generous term. One's a retired potter who used to recite Homer in taverns. Another is a woman with a voice like thunder who pretends to be a man to get past the no female performers rule. No one dares question her. The last one might actually be a goat, and nobody has the heart to correct him. You sit beside the makeshift stage and watch them rehearse. It's chaotic. Lines are forgotten, masks fall off, and at one point someone accidentally starts a small fire with a dramatic gesture and a poorly placed torch. Dionysus just applauds louder. Let them fail, he tells you. Let them bleed their fear onto the dirt. That's how the good stuff gets born. It's messy, but something's forming beneath the mess. A rhythm, a heartbeat. And here's your quirky tidbit of the day. The word tragedy actually comes from tragoidia, meaning goat song. No one's 100% sure why. Maybe because goats were sacrificed before performances. Maybe because the winners of early festivals got a goat as a prize. Or maybe because ancient Greek theater was just that. Awkwardly goat adjacent. Scholars still argue whether these early performances were purely religious rituals or if they were always meant to entertain. But you're watching it become both. The actors don't just perform, they invoke. They grieve, shout, plead with invisible gods, and then bow to applause that hasn't happened yet. One afternoon, a kid named Thespis shows up. He's skinny, loud, and possibly full of lies. But he does something none of the others have dared. He steps out from the chorus, alone, and speaks as a character. Not himself, not the group, just one person wearing one mask with one voice. It's electric. And historically, that really did happen. Thespis is considered the world's first actor, the original solo performer. He broke away from the chorus and took the stage as a singular persona, forever changing drama. You're here to see the moment when that fracture turns into firelight. Dionysus watches from the back, leaning against a fig tree. He's eating olives he definitely didn't buy. That one, he says between bites, has chaos in his bones. I like him. The rehearsals continue. Scripts are sharpened. Costumes stitched from old cloaks and stolen temple curtains. Someone suggests using real blood for the battle scenes. Dionysus just says, try it and see. But the city is beginning to notice. Crowds form at the edge of the construction site. Children climb onto ledges to peek over. Street vendors drift closer, whispering, the god is doing something. And not everyone is thrilled. A group of stern men in expensive robes visits the site one day. They're members of the Areopagus, Athens' traditional council of elders, and they're not impressed. This is a distraction, one hisses. A city on the brink does not need dancing. It needs clarity, another adds. Dionysus saunters up and offers them wine. They don't drink. One of them says sharply, this could divide the people. Dionysus smiles. Or unify them. They leave without drinking, probably a mistake. That night, someone throws a stone at the stage and snaps a support beam. The actors stop. The carpenters sigh. You hold your breath. Dionysus lifts the beam himself and plants it back. He doesn't say anything, but the next morning the entire crew shows up 2 hours early and works silently. This isn't just a stage anymore. It's a declaration. As you help paint crude columns onto a backdrop, a chorus practices their lines nearby. The words drift over to you, and they stick. When gods take masks, men take notice. When men wear masks, they become gods. You get goosebumps, because this whole time, you thought this was a trick, a clever ploy to distract Athens from its own self-destruction. But now, you're seeing something deeper. Theater isn't escapism, it's confrontation. It's making people sit still, shoulder to shoulder, and face the mirror together. See themselves in kings and beggars, villains and lovers, and decide in the silence after the final line what kind of city they want to be. The festival's approaching. 3 playwrights have been chosen. One young, one bold, one angry. The city will gather. They'll laugh, cry, argue in whispers, and for a few precious days they won't be soldiers or merchants or spies. They'll be an audience. The war drums are still faint, somewhere far across the hills. But here in the shadow of the Acropolis, the first theater in the world is rising, and the god of madness, wine, and truth is ready to call the curtain. You're standing at the edge of the theater as the sun rises behind the Acropolis, and everything smells like fresh wood, sweat, and nervous ambition. The theater of Dionysus is finally ready, mostly. The seats wobble a little, and one column looks like it's considering retirement. But still it stands. You've helped build this, hammered the nails, painted the mass. Watch this half-mad god charm a city into silence and attention. And now? Now comes the festival. It's called the City Dionysia, and it's more than just a party. It's a political act wrapped in ritual, wine, and musical numbers. A week-long celebration dedicated to Dionysus. It features parades, sacrifices, plays, and arguably the world's earliest version of a theater competition. Athens doesn't do things halfway. You follow Dionysus as he leads a processional through the city. It's not quiet. People bang tambourines, play reed pipes, dance in spirals, and chant things that mostly rhyme. There's a giant wooden phallus on wheels being pushed by a group of very serious-looking priests. You make eye contact with one. He nods solemnly. You nod back. You both immediately regret it. Historical fact? Yes, the phallus was real. Several, actually. These symbolize fertility, creativity, and the spirit of Dionysus himself. Scholars still argue whether the Athenians took this part seriously or if it was more tongue-in-cheek, pun fully intended. The parade ends at the theater, where the first sacrifice is made. A bull draped in garlands stands quietly as prayers are chanted. You turn your head before the knife falls, and Dionysus touches your shoulder. We mourn so we may laugh, he whispers. The crowd pours into the theater. You've never seen so many people packed into one place outside of a Spartan tax revolt. From generals to fishmongers, they all take their places on the stone seats. Some shade their eyes with woven fans. Others already clutch snacks. And now it begins. The first play. You can feel the nerves from backstage, or rather, back rock. There's no curtain, just actors hidden behind painted wooden panels. Thespis is up first. He adjusts his mask, breathes deep, and steps forward. And there it is, the gasp, not from him, but from the crowd. One man standing alone, speaking in a voice that is not his own. The chorus follows, singing in unison, responding to him with stomps and cries. It's hypnotic. Even the pigeons on the statues freeze. The play is tragic, literally. It tells the story of a man torn between loyalty to his family and loyalty to the state. He loses everything. No sword fights, no gods bursting from clouds, just words. And somehow it's devastating. Your quirky tidbit for today? Athenian audiences were so into it, they brought cushions, food, and sometimes emotional support goats. Okay, maybe not officially, but you do spot one small goat in the front row, chewing a fig leaf with great solemnity. Between plays, there are music contests, poetry battles, and comedic sketches that mostly roast politicians. One man impersonates Pericles with a giant fake nose. The crowd roars, even the officials laugh, but they're probably writing names down for later. That's the thing about this festival. It's not just sacred, it's social, it's satirical, it's dangerous. Because theater is becoming a tool, a sharp one. One play questions whether gods are fair. Another wonders aloud why the poor always die first in war. The laughter sticks in your throat. Dionysus sits just off stage, sipping wine and watching like he's seen it all before. Maybe he has. You notice a tension creeping through the upper tiers of the audience. Not everyone likes this new power. A wealthy merchant leans over and mutters, "Plays like this will ruin discipline." A farmer next to him replies, "Maybe it's the war doing that." They don't speak again, and scholars still argue whether Athenian democracy was strengthened or destabilized by public theater. You're starting to see both. By the third day, the emotional weight is crushing. The plays have turned darker. Betrayals, plagues. A woman blinded by grief and a man cursed by prophecy. You see grown men wiping their eyes. You feel it too. The way these actors hold pain like a torch, burning just enough for you to feel it, but not so much it burns you down. Catharsis? The emotional release Aristotle would one day define. But you don't need a philosopher to explain it. You're living it. And then, comedy, relief. The final day opens with dancers in fish costumes and ends with a play about a man suing the god Hermes for stealing his sandals. It's absurd, it's glorious. Someone in the back laughs so hard they fall off the bench. You don't even check if they're okay. It's that good. The people leave changed. You hear it in their murmurs as they file out. One boy recites a line about fate. An old man hums the melody of a chorus. Two women argue over whether the second act needed more stabbing. But you linger, because Dionysus hasn't moved. He sits alone in the center of the stage, just him and the silence after a storm. You sit beside him. "It worked," you whisper. He doesn't smile. He looks tired, or maybe just full. "They saw themselves," and he replies. And you know what he means. The masks, the stories, the wild dances and whispered truths. They didn't distract the city, they revealed it. This was never about avoiding war. It was about showing people what war does, how it starts in the heart. Long before the battlefield, you stay there as the lanterns burn out. The dawn is quiet. The goat from earlier sleeps in a pile of cloaks. Somewhere in the city, someone writes their first play. You're not going back to how things were. None of you are. The festival ends, but the city doesn't go back to normal. How could it? You've just watched thousands of Athenians laugh, cry, question, rage, together. A mass unburdening. And while the streets still echo with clanging armor and political speeches, something is different in the air. You walk through the agora the next day and overhear a group of stonemasons quoting lines from yesterday's tragedy, arguing whether the hero's fatal flaw was pride or trust. At a wine stall, a teenager pantomimes a scene from the fish costume comedy while her friends giggle uncontrollably. Even the tax collector seems a little more human, but the cracks are visible too. Not everyone was moved. Not everyone wanted to be. The powerful rarely like their portraits painted in satire. The archons, those high-ranking officials, call a private meeting. You aren't supposed to know this, but Dionysus is a god, so of course you do. They're debating what to do about him in the theater. Whether it's healthy, whether it's safe, one of them spits the word blasphemous. Too much feeling, he says. Too much truth. That's how revolutions begin. You sigh because, well, he's not totally wrong. Historical fact? Theater was both state-funded and state-monitored in ancient Athens. The city chose which playwrights could perform, and wealthy citizens were required to sponsor productions as part of their civic duty. Which is wild because it's like if every billionaire today had to bankroll a brutally honest musical about their own scandals. And still, even with all that control, the plays got through. They reached people. But now the city's leadership is nervous, especially because something else is happening. Other cities are noticing. Delegates from Thebes, Corinth, and even Sparta have heard about Athens' miracle festival. They send scouts, scribes, even rival poets to see what the fuss is about. You catch them scribbling in their scrolls, nodding when the audience gasps. Dionysus watches them with the calm of someone who once turned an entire army into grapevines. They'll steal the idea, you whisper. He shrugs. Let them. He's not interested in hoarding culture. He's interested in infection, not of bodies, but of minds. Let one city start telling its story honestly, and the next will follow. Soon everyone will be wearing masks and revealing truths. But first, Athens needs to survive. You wake up one morning to the sound of horns. Not the musical kind, the kind that mean troops are gathering. War has officially begun. It's not a surprise. Tensions with Sparta have been rising for months. Border raids, trade disputes, one too many philosophers giving one too many speeches. And now, the Peloponnesian War, long, bloody, unavoidable. And the theater, it's caught in the middle. Some want to shut it down. Distraction, they say. Luxury. Others argue it's more essential than ever. A city without stories forgets what it's fighting for. You see both sides. But Dionysus doesn't flinch. He calls a meeting with the playwrights. Yes, a war council. They arrive in cloaks and sandals, dragging scrolls and amphorae of ink. Sophocles is there, older now, with creased hands and a calm, terrifying gaze. Euripides arrives barefoot and annoyed, having just gotten back from yelling at some rocks. Aristophanes? He's late and probably hungover, but he shows. And Dionysus stands before them like a director on opening night. War's begun, he says. What are you going to write about it? And that's the twist. You expected him to say, stop, pause, wait. But instead he tells them, say what the generals won't. Show what the blood looks like. Make people laugh while they're bleeding. They nod. This is no longer about masks and goats. It's about memory. Your quirky tidbit? Sophocles, yes, that's Sophocles, not only wrote Oedipus Rex, but also served as a general. Theater and war weren't separate worlds for him. He lived both. Some say he won battles with strategies learned in rehearsals. Scholars still argue whether his tragedies were shaped by battle trauma or if his battles were shaped by tragic thinking. But you see it now. Art and war are mirrors. Both demand sacrifice. Both require strategy, storytelling, and belief. And both can leave cities changed forever. Back in the theater, the plays shift. No more mythical kings. Now we get soldiers with muddy feet, wives waiting at port, kids chasing rumors of returning fathers. One play, banned after its first showing, dares to question why the war started at all. It's read in whispers, passed hand to hand like contraband. The audience gets braver too. They don't just watch, they respond. They cheer for honesty, boo for propaganda. When a politician tries to clap at a line clearly mocking him, the whole crowd turns to stare. He does not clap again. Even in war, the city Dionysia continues. Some years it's smaller, leaner, fewer costumes. One time the chorus has to borrow shields from the army warehouse. And another time, there's no goat prize, so they hand out a large wheel of cheese. You sit next to Dionysus and ask, is it still working? He closes his eyes. listens. In the distance, a young man recites a line from Euripides while tending a funeral pyre. Yes, Dionysus says, it's working. But there's one more thing. This war is not short. You live through years of it. And every year the plays get darker, sharper. One even depicts Dionysus himself as an outsider god, mocked by mortals. It's controversial. People gasp, but he just laughs. That's how you know it's real, he says. He doesn't want worship. He wants honesty. And that's when it hits you. Theater, this entire time, has never been about avoiding war. That was the bait, the trap, the warm wine. What Dionysus wants, is for people to face war with their eyes open, to question power, to feel each other's grief, to tell the story of what they've become, and maybe, just maybe, to change, one line at a time. The years drag on, and so do the wars. You watch the city change, not just in scars or rubble, but in spirit. The theater becomes the pulse of Athens, beating slower when hope dims, louder when courage sparks. You wander the dusty streets and overhear conversations between strangers who once wouldn't have exchanged more than a nod. Now they quote lines from plays as if they're sacred texts. To suffer woes which hope thinks infinite, one man murmurs, but endure. The words hang in the air like incense. The theater's power feels both miraculous and terrifying. Some say it's saving the city from itself. Others whisper that it's stirring dangerous fires beneath the surface. You remember the first festival? The joy and chaos, the wine and laughter, and wonder if the spirit of that first night can survive the years ahead. One evening you attend a performance that's whispered about even before the curtain rises. It's a new kind of play, neither pure tragedy nor comedy, but a gritty blend that makes you squirm and chuckle in uncomfortable equal measure. The playwright, a sharp-tongued woman named Agathon, introduces a piece about soldiers returning home, only to find their families changed, their honors questioned, and their lives fractured. The audience listens, rapt, some nodding in recognition, others frowning at truths they'd rather ignore. You notice a group of soldiers sitting stiffly near the front, their faces unreadable. After the play, they remain silent for a long time, as if the words have punched through their armor. This play is different. It's raw. It's immediate. It's what happens when art reaches beyond entertainment to touch the wounds no one admits are there. A fringe tidbit? Agathon's plays often featured female perspectives unheard of in earlier works, leading to rumors she was inspired by goddesses herself, though scholars still debate whether this was a political move or genuine expression. You can't help but wonder if Dionysus whispers her lines, weaving his divine mischief into every syllable. Outside, the city's tensions simmer. Spartans raid nearby villages, allies argue over resources, and amidst all this, the theater keeps pulsing like a living heartbeat. You cross paths with a man named Cleon, a fiery politician who despises the theater's influence. He claims the plays make people soft, unwilling to fight for their city. You argue back, saying the theater makes people human, reminds them what's at stake. Cleon snarls, "Humanity doesn't win wars, steel does." Historians still argue whether cultural expressions like theater weakened or strengthened Athens during its darkest days. One night, after a particularly brutal skirmish, you find yourself sitting alone with Dionysus atop the Acropolis. The city lights flicker below, and the distant sounds of mourning echo softly. He looks at you, tired eyes gleaming. "War exposes truth," he says, "but truth demands courage to see and speak." You nod, feeling the weight of years pressing on your shoulders. He adds, "That's why theater matters. It's not just stories, it's survival." You watch as a cool breeze sweeps through the ruins, carrying whispers of past festivals and future hopes. And somewhere deep inside, you realize the story is far from over. The war grinds on, and with it, the theater evolves. You find yourself returning again and again to the stone seats of the Theater of Dionysus, where every performance feels like a lifeline, a fragile thread keeping the city tethered to its humanity. One day, a young actor named Aeschylus catches your attention. He's new on the scene, but bursting with raw energy and bold ideas. His plays dive deep into fate, justice, and the gods' inscrutable will. You catch him rehearsing lines about a king who defies destiny, only to be crushed by the very fate he tries to escape. You watch Aeschylus at work, sweat glistening on his brow, voice booming across the open-air theater, carrying words that challenge the gods themselves. His work is grand, heavy with symbolism, yet accessible, like a hammer gently shaping the city's soul. Here's a quirky fact for you. Aeschylus is credited with introducing the second actor to Greek drama, which means he changed theater forever. Instead of one actor and a chorus, now there's real dialogue, real conflict on stage. Historians still argue how much this innovation shaped the emotional power of theater, but there's no doubt it amplified the drama. You feel the shift in the crowd, too. No longer passive observers, the audience becomes participants in the stories, leaning in, reacting, debating long after the play's end. This new style makes the stories feel alive, raw and immediate, like they're unfolding right before your eyes. One evening, the city buzzes with rumors. The Spartans are advancing. The war is getting closer. Anxiety thickens the air. But then, in a bold move, the city leaders decide to stage a massive production to boost morale, a tragedy about sacrifice and honor. The theater becomes a battlefield itself, where stories are weapons and masks are armor. You find yourself backstage watching as actors prepare to embody warriors, gods, and victims. The scent of pine resin and burnt incense fills the air, mingling with nervous sweat. Aeschylus takes a deep breath, steps onto the stage, and begins. The play grips the city. Soldiers and civilians alike find solace, strength, and sorrow in the unfolding drama. It's as if the theater holds up a mirror, reflecting the city's fears and hopes. But not everyone appreciates this power. Some say theater is a distraction, a dangerous indulgence when the city should be focused on survival. Others fear it reveals too much, undermining discipline. You overhear a heated argument in the agora where a merchant argues with a soldier, "We don't need more stories, we need shields." The soldier snaps back, "Stories are the shields of the soul." The debate rages on, but you know one thing for certain. Theater is no longer just entertainment, it's a necessity. You glance toward Dionysus, who watches the city with a quiet smile. He seems to understand this truth deeply, as if he's known it all along. The war will rage, lives will be lost. But the stories will endure, and so will you. You notice the city is changing not just because of war, but because of who's telling its stories. Aeschylus is bold, but then comes Sophocles, calmer, more subtle, whose plays dig into the human psyche, exploring the painful contradictions within us all. You catch a performance of Antigone, and it strikes you how the play wrestles with loyalty, to family, to state, to conscience. The tension in the air is palpable as Antigone defies King Creon, choosing to honor her brother over the law. You watch the crowd, faces rapt, some whispering furiously, others gripping their cloaks tighter. That moment feels oddly familiar, like watching the city itself torn between obedience and rebellion. Historians still argue whether Sophocles wrote Antigone as a direct critique of Athenian democracy or as a timeless exploration of moral conflict, but you can't help but feel its relevance deep in your bones. Outside the theater, you notice everyday Athenians quoting the play, debating its meaning at fountains and market stalls. The stories seep into daily life. You stumble into a lively discussion between a group of women who argue about Antigone's bravery and recklessness, wondering aloud what it means to stand up when the world says no. This is new. Before, you mostly heard men discussing politics and war. Now voices once sidelined rise in the chorus of the city. The theater has become a place where not just kings and gods speak, but common people, women, and even slaves find their stories reflected. This isn't lost on the powers that be. Some feel threatened, others curious. Then there's Aristophanes, the comic genius, who pokes fun at everything from politicians to philosophers to even Dionysus himself. His plays are peppered with bawdy jokes and sharp satire, making the city laugh even as it grieves. You watch the crowd roaring at one of his productions, where a chorus of frogs croaks complaints about war, bureaucracy, and bad poetry. It's ridiculous and profound all at once. Here's a quirky tidbit. Aristophanes sometimes sneaked in real politicians' names into his jokes, which got him banned from the festival once. Historians still debate how much influence his humor had on public opinion, but it certainly made the elite nervous. As the war grinds on, Aristophanes' laughter feels like a rebellion in itself, a reminder that even in darkness, humor survives. One night, you walk past the city gates and overhear a soldier quoting a line from Lysistrata, a play about women withholding sex to end the war. You chuckle. That's one strategy you hadn't considered. But the city is exhausted. The war drags on longer than anyone hoped. The streets are scarred, the people worn thin. And yet, through every scar, every sleepless night, the theater keeps breathing, telling the stories that bind the city together. Because at its heart, theater isn't just about acting, it's about understanding. And understanding, you realize, might be the most powerful weapon of all. The war grinds on, but so does the theater's innovation. Now, the boundaries between actors and audience blur more than ever. You find yourself swept up in the energy of an unusual performance, one where the chorus steps off the stage to mingle with the crowd, their chants echoing in the streets as much as the theater. You watch a young playwright named Euripides, a rebel with a sharp tongue and a sharper mind. His plays don't shy away from questioning the gods, exposing hypocrisy, and showing the rawest, darkest sides of human nature. One night you hear him whisper backstage, "If the gods won't speak, we must." His characters aren't heroes. They're flawed, messy people caught in impossible choices. His heroines often challenge traditional roles, speaking truths that unsettle even the most devout. A fringe tidbit for you. Euripides is sometimes blamed for destroying traditional Greek tragedy with his psychological depth and skepticism, but historians still debate whether he was actually a revolutionary force or just reflecting a changing society. You watch as his latest play causes a stir. Some walk out in shock, others stay riveted. The city is divided but engaged. This is no longer mere entertainment. It's a mirror held up to a society unraveling under the strain of endless conflict. Outside the theater, rumors swirl of soldiers refusing to fight after seeing Euripides' plays. Some leaders blame the playwright for weakening morale. Others secretly admire his bravery. You overhear a conversation between two generals, one mocking the soft stories, the other grudgingly admitting that these plays make soldiers think. Maybe too much. You feel the tension. The theater is becoming a battleground for ideas, a place where stories can wound or heal. One night, after a particularly controversial performance, you find yourself wandering through the city's darkened streets. The cool air is thick with whispers of rebellion and hope. You pass a group of women singing softly, a lullaby that seems to carry the weight of every lost son, every shattered dream. And you realize theater has become the city's soul, its conscience, its voice. Dionysus, watching silently from the shadows, smiles faintly. He knows this is the point where stories stop being simple tales and become something much greater. Because now, theater isn't just about avoiding war, it's about surviving it. As the war drags into its darker years, you notice how the theater becomes more than a place for stories. It becomes a refuge, a sanctuary where the city's wounds can be aired without swords drawn. You walk through the crowds before a performance, feeling the mix of anxiety and hope humming in the air. One evening, a play opens about the consequences of war on families. The audience watches in silence as a mother grieves her lost son, a soldier struggles with guilt, and a city wonders if victory is worth the price. The emotional weight settles on you like a heavy cloak. You overhear a soldier whispering, "This feels like my story." This shared pain begins to build an unspoken solidarity among citizens, soldiers, and even enemies. Historians still argue whether these performances helped foster empathy or simply reinforced divisions, but you sense that the theater's power lies in its ability to humanize everyone, even those labeled the enemy. You remember hearing that Dionysus was worshipped not only as a god of wine and revelry, but also as a god who breaks down barriers, blurring the line between order and chaos, civilized and wild. It feels fitting that his invention, the theater, becomes a place where the city's sharp edges soften. Then something unexpected happens. A truce is proposed, and with it, a massive festival to celebrate peace. You expect pomp and grandeur, but instead, the city offers raw, honest plays about loss, hope, and the fragile nature of peace. Actors from enemy cities are invited. For the first time, you see Greek and Spartan actors sharing the stage, performing scenes that speak of common humanity. It's awkward at first, resentments simmering beneath polite smiles. But slowly, the stories begin to build bridges. This cultural exchange sparks debates across the city. Some see it as a betrayal, others as the first real step toward healing. You sit among the crowd, watching a scene where former enemies embrace, their grief and hope intertwined. It's the theater's quiet magic, forcing people to see beyond hatred, to recognize shared stories and shared pain. And you realize that Dionysus's invention wasn't just about avoiding war. It's about imagining a world where war might someday end. The war's echoes still ripple through the city, but the theater now pulses with a new kind of energy, one of cautious optimism. You notice that the performances are becoming more experimental, mixing mass with music, myth with reality, humor with heartbreak. It's as if the city's collective psyche is searching for a way to understand what happened and what might come next. One evening, you find yourself at a play that blends dance and dialogue, a production about the birth of a new city rising from the ashes of conflict. The actors move fluidly, their shadows stretching long in the fading light, creating a mesmerizing tapestry of movement and sound. You realize the theater has become a space not only for storytelling, but for communal healing. The audience sits in quiet reflection, some wiping tears, others holding hands, all sharing a moment of fragile connection. There's a quirky fact you might enjoy. Some performances began incorporating live animals, goats, of course, in honor of Dionysus, adding unpredictable elements to the shows. Historians still debate whether these animals were mere spectacle or symbolic reminders of nature's wild, uncontrollable spirit. As the festival concludes, you hear whispers of a new playwright emerging, Euripides' student, who pushes boundaries even further, blending political commentary with personal tragedy in ways that make the city squirm and think. You walk through the streets, noticing how the theater's influence spreads beyond the stage. Merchants sell scrolls of famous plays, children reenact scenes in the marketplaces. Even the city's leaders find themselves quoting lines in their speeches, weaving stories into politics like threads in a tapestry. But the city remains cautious. Memories of war linger like shadows, reminding everyone of how easily peace can unravel. In a quiet moment, you meet an old actor who tells you, "Theater teaches us to see the world through another's eyes. That's a dangerous and beautiful thing." You nod, understanding that Dionysus's gift is both a balm and a challenge. As night falls, the city hums softly, the distant echo of a chorus singing a lullaby to a weary world. And you, too, feel a gentle hope settling over you, like the soft embrace of dusk. The city feels like it's holding its breath, caught between the past scars and the fragile promise of peace. You walk past the theater one evening, its stone walls glowing faintly in the moonlight, and sense how much this place has come to mean to everyone. more than just a stage or a festival ground. A new generation of playwrights emerges, blending old myths with the harsh realities of the present. You witness a performance that questions the gods themselves, asking if they care about human suffering or simply watch from their distant thrones. It's a risky move, one that sparks fierce debates in the city square. Some call it blasphemy, others praise it as necessary truth-telling. One playwright even stages a play about a god who loses power because humans stop believing, a clear metaphor for the changing role of religion and power in the city. This shift sparks a quirky rumor that Dionysus himself might be fading, losing his grip on the city as skepticism rises. Historians still argue about whether this reflected real religious changes or simply theatrical storytelling. You watch the crowds reacting, some with fear, others with laughter, and many with thoughtful silence. The theater is no longer just a way to avoid war. It's a place where the city wrestles with its identity, its gods, and its future. You overhear a scholar whispering to a student, "The stage is the city's mirror, but also its question." And that's when you realize something profound. Dionysus didn't just invent theater to stop a war. He invented it so the city could survive all its wars, those fought with swords and those fought in the heart. You step back, taking in the quiet night, the soft murmur of voices discussing plays, politics, and gods. The city's stories ripple outward, weaving together past and future, myth and reality. And you feel perhaps for the first time that the story is less about one god, one war, or one city, and more about us all. The theater has become a heartbeat for the city, a steady rhythm in the chaos. You find yourself wandering through its corridors, past masks hanging like silent witnesses, through spaces filled with echoes of laughter, tears, and whispered secrets. The stories told here have become part of the city's DNA. You meet an old storyteller who says, "Theater is a dance between truth and illusion, and in that dance we find ourselves." You can't help but agree. The plays have evolved into more than performances. They are living conversations between gods and mortals, past and present, reality and dream. One evening, you watch a play where the chorus takes center stage, narrating the city's own history, its triumphs, tragedies, and stubborn resilience. The audience listens, caught between tears and smiles, as the lines weave together the city's wounds and its hopes. You learn that the tradition of using masks evolved not just for practical reasons, but to let actors slip between identities, genders, and social roles. A quirky trick that invites empathy and imagination. Historians still debate exactly how this influenced ancient theater's social impact, but the masks undeniably helped tell stories that crossed boundaries and broke taboos. Outside the theater, you notice how the city's mood has softened. People move with a slower, gentler pace, carrying with them the stories and lessons born on the stage. One night, under a silver moon, you hear Dionysus speak quietly to you. Theater is not just a place to avoid war. It's a way to live with it, learn from it, and maybe, just maybe, transcend it. You close your eyes, the sounds of the city fading into a soft, steady hum. The laughter, the cries, the music, all weaving into a tapestry of memory and hope. And you understand now why this God's gift endured long after the war ended. Because stories like wine ferment in the heart, transforming bitterness into something strangely sweet. The years pass, and the war that once threatened to tear the city apart slowly fades into history. Yet the theater remains, a living monument to the city's resilience, creativity, and spirit. You walk once more through the crowded theater, the air thick with the scent of olive oil lamps and pine resin. You watch a new generation of actors rehearse, their voices ringing out across the stone seats, carrying stories of gods and mortals, of love and loss, of conflict and peace. It strikes you how the theater has become a sanctuary, a place where the city's past and future meet in a delicate dance. Here, stories are not just told, they are lived, felt, and shared. You recall how Dionysus first gave the city this gift, not just to avoid war, but to transform it. Through tragedy and comedy, the people found a way to understand each other, to grieve, to hope. There's a quirky tidbit that feels fitting to end on. The word thespian, meaning actor, comes from thespis, often credited as the first actor to step out of the chorus and speak alone. Historians still debate if Thespis was real or mythical, but his name lives on every time someone takes the stage. You smile thinking about how one god's playful invention grew into something so powerful it shaped cultures for millennia. As you look around, you realize the story is far from over. Every night, the theater breathes new life into old tales and births new ones. It invites everyone, soldier or civilian, poet or skeptic, to join the dance. And as you sit in the quiet after the final applause, you feel the soft hum of the city, the gentle pulse of stories still waiting to be told. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The city sleeps, wrapped in the soft blanket of night, its wounds slowly healing under the watchful eyes of gods and mortals alike. The stories whispered here linger like the last notes of a lullaby, gentle and persistent. You feel the weight of the journey through war, fear, hope, and renewal, settling into a quiet peace. Rest easy now. The theater will keep the stories safe, and tomorrow brings the promise of new ones. Good night and sweet dreams.